Good evening and welcome to another edition of Marlins Monday. My name is Eric Wiedeke. You can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke. I hope everyone is enjoying a safe and happy Labor Day here. It is Monday, September 1st, 2025, and the Miami Marlins did play a game today. Not going to talk much about the game that was played today because, quite frankly, it's not really worth talking about. As they get blanked by the Nationals 2-0 in a game where the most fireworks you saw were from Clayton McCullough coming out and defending his guy Xavier Edwards, following him getting thrown out of the ball game for arguing and then continuing to argue with the home plate umpire. McCullough seemed to get much more of a money's worth without getting thrown out, so that was interesting. But aside from that tangent, I hope everyone is doing well today. Do just want to remind you guys to like, comment, and subscribe as it helps everything that we do at the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. From the Marlins, the Heat, the Hurricanes, the Panthers, Inter Miami, all of it, the Miami Hurricanes, everything that you can imagine here that's South Florida sports, we're doing it and we're covering it better than anyone else in the sports scene. But I do want to talk now about some really interesting developments in Marlins land, as we are going to start off by talking about the rosters expanding here for the September call-ups. And I can't lie, I can't sugarcoat it. It was an underwhelming group of call-ups. Granted, I don't think that those are going to be the only guys that we see called up in September. It's not just going to be Michael Peterson and Luarbert Arias and Brian Navarreto. That's not going to be the only three guys that we see come up. There's still going to be there are other guys that have gone down recently that are going to have to get replaced. But the biggest September call-up actually might be Thomas White to AAA, as he and Kemp Alderman will get a taste of Jacksonville before they likely start their 2026 seasons over there. Both of those guys really deserving. Thomas White, I mean, I don't know what other superlatives you can throw out at him. He's been absolutely sterling over the last month and a half, 2 months at AA. I think he's ready to pitch in a major league game right now if you absolutely needed him to. But the Marlins don't need him to right now. But there are some guys that I do think that the Marlins do need to pitch in major league ball games, and I'll get to talking about that as we see as we get into some of the other news later on today with some of the injuries that we've seen to the Marlins pitching. You know, with the September call-ups, I think a lot of it had to do with today was going to be a bullpen game. And so you're going to have to, you need arms. You need an Arias. You need a Peterson to potentially get you through a bullpen game. I thought the bullpen actually pitched really well in today's ball game. The lineup was lifeless. For as much good as they've done recently with the bats, especially at the end in that series against the Mets, to kind of fall really flat against the Nationals in this one was pretty disappointing. Although, again, with this Marlins team right now, especially as constructed, you're going to get a lot of these uneven performances. They're going to score, 8-9 runs one day and then 0 the next. It's just what you're going to get with this Marlins ball club right now. But I do think at some point you will see some very interesting prospects come. I think Robbie Snelling is the biggest kind of wild card, will he, won't he guy at this point, especially with Ryan Weathers and Jansen Junk projected to come back at some point soon, relatively. Weathers will have his second rehab start this week, pitched through about 60 pitches in his first rehab start, so you can't imagine he's more than 2 starts away at the absolute most. And Jansen Junk hasn't been away for all that long, so I don't really know if he's even going to need rehab starts to come back. But, just going off of that a little bit, you're going to have a guy in Snelling who is scheduled to pitch tomorrow. I think it'll be really interesting to see, whether he gets scratched from his start for the Jumbo Shrimp tomorrow night, because it does look like Thomas White is coming up and he's going to take a spot in the rotation. It looks like he might take Mazur's spot or Gusto's spot in the rotation over there in AAA. But I do think Robbie Snelling, especially as Edward Cabrera, who we did get the news today that he does have an elbow sprain. Really, really tough news for a guy who's been a breakout player for the Marlins this season. Really put the consistency together in a way that he hasn't in the past. And, you got to feel for a guy like that who's really grinded, who's made the adjustments and gotten better, that he is likely going to miss 2026 with an injury. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. He had the elbow soreness a few weeks ago coming out of the break. He has an elbow sprain. Typically, these things precipitate Tommy John surgery. I hope that's not the case. I'd really like to see Edward Cabrera pitch in 2026, along with Sandy, along with Yuri, along with Robbie Snelling, along with some of the other guys that you might have ready to go in 2026. But unfortunately, if I had to guess right now, I would say that's not in the cards for the Miami Marlins in 2026. But they do have good pitching depth, and so they can sustain something like this. But obviously, Cabrera, having been really the bright spot of the rotation all year long, that's kind of a bittersweet ending to his season. Really not what you want to see as the calendar turns here into September. But I do think that it opens up that opportunity for a guy like Robbie Snelling to actually come up and pitch in the month of September here, because you look at what the Marlins are going to have. They went with a bullpen game today. I don't think a guy like Ryan Gusto is really going to stop you from calling up Robbie Snelling. And I understand from the Marlins perspective. And it's one of those things where there's such perverse incentives in these things, because I understand from like a team building perspective, if you call up Robbie Snelling now and he pitches for a month, you burn an entire season. He becomes a free agent in 2031 instead of 2032. But on the flip side, where you are in your contention window, 2031, 2032, that should not be in your consideration right now. 2026, 2027, 2028, that should be your consideration at the moment. Snelling has dominated at AAA. There's really no need to see any more of him at that level. I think he's done everything that he's needed to do in the minors. He's taken a huge step forward this year. And I think right now he would be very well suited, especially in light of the Edward Cabrera injury, because I think he's a guy that directly, the implications really involve him pretty directly in terms of his spot in the rotation in 2026 and beyond, and potentially being able to be a guy that really, is an established piece in your rotation by the time opening day 26 rolls around, where I think right now, in light of the Cabrera injury, I think you're penciling him into your starting rotation next season. And then in light of that, I think you want to get him a handful of starts here in September so that it's not, okay, well, you know what? Hey, here's all the pressure in the world of, you haven't even made your first major league start, but yeah, you're one of our 5 starters and we're going to, training wheels are off. There you go. And again, I think in a way you call him up earlier so that when you're really counting on him, which would be in 2026, because you're not contending this season, it's not his first go at it. And he's seen, you got to get him used to seeing major league hitters, how they're going to adjust to him and how they're going to adapt. And I think that getting that experience for him is something that would be really valuable, and I do hope that the organization sees it that way. The Brian Navarreto thing is really kind of weird to me. If I'm honest, I don't quite understand that. Navarreto, journeyman catcher. Maybe he's just the guy to kind of eat innings and take some of that stress off of Agustin Ramirez catching a little bit. Although, again, I don't know why you can't find ample at-bats for a guy like Joe Mack to make his debut here in 2025. And I know that Mack has been up and down at AAA, but I think that the glove plays well enough. And I think that the bat has been good enough overall between what he's done at AA and AAA. And it's been, more than one season now of above average production at the catcher spot in the minors that I think you are willing to roll the dice there, or at least you should be. But, I think with those two guys, there is a chance that you see them called up here within the next handful of days. Mack hasn't played at Jacksonville in the last 3 or 4 days, which I find very interesting. Maybe telling up, but I mean, who knows with the way that this organization operates? They kind of always, seem to zig when everyone expects them to zag. And sometimes it works. Other times it leaves you scratching your head. And I mean, quite frankly, I think they enjoy operating that way. But I think that they would be missing out on a big opportunity in terms of seeing these two guys at the major league level, two guys that could be really big pieces of your 2026 lineup and rotation, respectively, if you allow them to be for the Miami Marlins. But in light of the Marlins losing Edward Cabrera, I do want to talk about, it's a shame because it almost really feels like, with the news that you get today, that you traded Edward Cabrera for Sandy Alcantara, right? Because Sandy, since the All-Star break, 9 starts, 4-2, 3.16 ERA, 48 strikeouts, 15 walks, and 57 innings pitched. That includes a start against the Royals where he was kind of subpar. If you go back now to his last 8 starts, he's pitching to a 2.82 ERA in 51 innings pitched, averaging just about 6 innings per start. He's gone 4 starts in a row, 7 innings, or he's pitched in his last 4 starts, he's pitched to a 1.67 ERA. He's been fantastic. He looks like the old Sandy. He's hitting triple digits late in games again. He's spotting the fastball. The curveball is biting more. He's not leaving it hanging nearly as much as he was. So I think that there's really positive signs there with a guy like Sandy. And I think that, having him emerge again to anchor your rotation is going to be even more valuable now in 2026 as Cabrera, as the Marlins have to fill kind of that hole that Cabrera leaves behind, kind of being the guy that was carrying the mantle for the starters here in 2025. But, as Cabrera does go down, there are other guys that it looks like will be coming around here relatively shortly for the Miami Marlins. Ryan Weathers does appear on the way. Griffin Conine is slated to start a rehab assignment this week, which I think is really good news in light of, I think when he got injured early on in April, he was kind of assumed to just be out for the season. And it was, we'll see in 2026, Griff, later, you're gone. But he's battled back. He's going to get an opportunity. I'd be interested to see him maybe in a first base capacity. You don't know what the arm strength is going to look like coming off of a shoulder injury for Griffin Conine, especially when you have other guys in the outfield too right now that you kind of want to see in Mesa and Marcy and Hernandez. Not that Hernandez precludes Griffin Conine from getting reps in the outfield. I think he absolutely should still get some outfield reps But right now, I think you just need to get him as many at-bats as possible here through September. Because, again, you're just collecting as much information as possible going into 2026 for this ball club. Same thing with Ryan Weathers as he comes back. You want to get him maybe about 3 starts here down the stretch to, at the very least, give yourself something to feel good about heading into 26 for this team. If Weathers can pitch well for you down the stretch, if Snelling comes up and pitches well for you down the stretch, I think that drastically changes the outlook for the Marlins 2026, at least in terms of public perception of what the outlook is. I don't think it would change. I mean, listen, Ryan Weathers coming up in September, and it's not like the Marlins are magically going to be a 90-win team instead of a 78-win team because Ryan Weathers made 3 starts in September. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But I think that it builds some goodwill to have these guys come up in September and play well and give people something to look forward to for 2026, especially in light of, some disappointing news with Edward Cabrera going down. And then lastly, just some minor league kind of news and notes here. Another guy at the AA level that's really kind of been on fire of late. And it's a shame because his season was injury shortened. He might be a guy that's getting called AAA if he didn't get hurt in the middle of the season. And that's going to be Fenwick Trimble, a guy that was drafted in 2024 for the Marlins, who's really kind of ascended really rapidly through the system. A 4th-round pick in 24, started this year at high A, hit like crazy over there, got called up to AA, got hurt really shortly after, kind of started slow as he came back from injury, but you go back now to his last 32 games since July 27th. He's hitting .292 with a .417 on base, .907 OPS, 4 homers, 19 runs batted in 32 games, 23 strikeouts to just 19 walks to just 23 strikeouts in those 32 games. So another guy that looks like, kind of a really similar hitting profile to a guy like Jacob Marcy, although not nearly the speed guy as a Marcy is, and he is a righty. But it's a good profile to have a guy that can hit for average, get you 20 homers, play pretty good defense in the corners, especially when you consider that you've got also Kemp Alderman came up to AAA. His first game hits 114 miles per hour. I think that's the hardest hit ball in all of AAA this season. So he showed off some of that 70 grade power. You've also got guys like Carson Milbrandt at single A, who has been lights out of late. He had another start, 4 2/3 innings, struck out 10, walked only 2. He's another guy that's going to be headed up to AA soon. And then one of my favorite prospects who's really kind of come on this year, Eleazar Dishmay, since getting the call to Beloit this season, has been just absolutely fantastic. Overall this year, he's 5-5 with a 285, but you look at since being called up to high A Beloit, he's had 4 starts, 20 innings pitched, 2-0 with a 180, 174 batting average against 27 strikeouts to just 3 walks. He's a guy that could start at AA next season. And again, it's just more of that pitching depth coming through for the Marlins as they continue to build up the system. But in order to do that, and in order to give these guys in the lower levels their opportunities to come up, you need the guys in the upper levels to come up and get their opportunities. So it remains to be seen if that will happen. Robbie Snelling is due to make a a start tomorrow at Jacksonville. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets scratched or not. But regardless of what happens throughout the rest of the week for the Marlins here as they play the Nationals and the Phillies down the stretch of this week, we will have it covered here for you next Monday with another episode of Marlins Monday, hopefully with some really good and fun news to discuss. My name is Eric Wiedeke. You can follow me on X/Twitter at Eric Wiedeke, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.